One of the most popular options of selling a home is hiring a real estate agent and letting them handle it. Since Danny happens to be a licensed real estate agent, I'm going to ask her to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of this method of selling your home.
Thanks, Mark. So when you want to sell a house traditionally, the first thing that you're going to want to do is hire a real estate agent. That agent is then going to do some research on some comparable properties in your area. And what I mean by that is properties that have sold or are active on the market now that are similar to your house that you're about to sell. So you can understand what your competition looks like and what other properties similar to yours sold for in the last, say, 3 to 6 months. Next, they're going to go ahead and create a net sheet. And on that net sheet, they're going to take the value of your property, what they estimate to be the value of your property, and they're going to subtract any underlying liens as well as any other costs that are going to be involved in a traditional sale. That way they can make some recommendations to you on number one, how you should sell the property, as well as possibly suggesting a selling price range. Now, depending on your situation, sometimes that net sheet does mean that you're going to be making money on the sale. Hooray! And sometimes, unfortunately, it means that you're going to be bringing money to closing just to be able to sell your property. And that's where you want to look at some other alternatives if that's going to be the case. So if you are able to sell your house traditionally, the advantage is that you do get out from under the house and you're able to move on. And what I mean by that is the deed's going to transfer. You hand over those keys at closing and you're done. You can go rent a house or buy another house and just go ahead and move on. Another advantage is that if you are facing a short sale foreclosure, possibly a bankruptcy or deed in lieu, certainly selling your house traditionally, even if you do have to bring money to the table, is a better alternative than those. So let's talk about the disadvantages. Those are numerous, and I categorize them under two topics, which is cost and time. So under the topic of cost, you have to get the house ready for listing or for showing, and that's going to include possibly some repairs, possibly staging the house, certainly cleaning it up and getting it ready to show, and maybe sometimes pre-inspections to help you with negotiations. Those costs are going to range anywhere from 1 to 5%. Real estate commission, anywhere from 6 to 8%. And when I'm giving you these percentages, I'm comparing them to the actual list price of the house. So if it's a $100,000 house, because that's an easy number, 1 to 5% means $1,000 to $5,000. Real estate commission, 6 to 8% means $6,000 to $8,000. And it depends on your area and what realtors are going to charge to list your property. There's also a gap between list price and sales price, and not a lot of agents are going to have this conversation with you, but I'm going to here really quick. That can be anywhere from 3 to 5% depending on your area. Here in our area, it's about 3%, and what I mean by that is if the house, again, is $100,000 just for simple math purposes, then I know to set my seller's expectations that they're probably going to get an offer somewhere between $95,000 to $97,000 because that's the common gap between list to sales price that we have in our particular area. Your area might be a little bit less or possibly even a little bit more. So I'm going to keep it at 3 to 5%. The closing costs are going to range anywhere from 2 to 3%, and it gets even higher in some states. So you'll want to be familiar with that in case it is more than 2 to 3%. So far, just with what we've talked about, getting the house ready, real estate commission, that gap between list price and sales price, and the closing costs, we're already somewhere between 12 and 21% of costs to sell your property. Again, with a $100,000 house, that means $12,000 to $21,000 just now. Now let's go get into some more costs. Negotiations. Buyers always want to negotiate and get a deal on your property. So that's going to be anywhere from 3 to 5% in my experience. And that could be asking for home warranties. It could be asking for seller concessions. What I mean by seller concessions is when a buyer is getting a loan, perhaps an FHA loan where they have little down payment. They can only put, say, 3% down. They need the seller to help them pay for their closing costs. And so they ask for seller concessions when they make you an offer. Repairs are also something that a lot of buyers will ask you to do this, that, or whatever as a part of negotiations of a contract. So that's why I put that at 3 to 5%. So now add that up, we're at 15 to 26% of costs just to sell your property. And again, using a $100,000 example, that's $15,000 to $26,000 to sell your property traditionally. Now let's talk about holding costs because we're not done yet. Holding costs are the length of time it takes you to sell your property once you put it on the market. So let's just say that it takes 6 months to sell your property. If your mortgage payment, which includes principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, is $1,000 a month, and if it takes 6 months to sell your property, that's another $6,000 out of your pocket that you've spent in holding costs just to sell your property on the traditional market. And that involves both cost and time, of course, because who wants to wait 6 months to sell your property? Some other time issues are strict lending guidelines. So The lending guidelines in today's market right now are so strict. You have a smaller buyer pool, which means your house is sitting on the market for a longer period because a lot of buyers can't get loans. If buyers can't get loans, you can't sell your house, which just adds to your holding costs. You also have lengthy mortgage approvals. So let's just say they can get a loan. Hooray, that's fantastic. Now it's going to take somewhere between 45 to 60 plus days in order for that financing to go all the way through. And let's just say you get it on under contract. So now you're sitting that 45 to 60 days hoping the financing goes through. Sometimes it does. Unfortunately, the reality is that sometimes the buyer's financing falls through and then you have to start all over. Property pricing is another issue you want to consider. Again, this is something a lot of agents aren't going to discuss with you, but it is a reality. Both you and your agent need to make sure you're pricing the property to sell. If you price the property or overprice the property for your area, hoping to get as much as you can out of it, and it's overpriced compared to the other competition that's on the market of similar homes, what that's going to mean is that all the buyers are going to go look at the other homes and not yours. And now we're 3 to 6 months down the line, and you're deciding, okay, let's go ahead and do a price reduction. Well, now buyers are going, well, why isn't that property selling? What's wrong with that property that it didn't sell? So now they're scared of buying your house, which just adds to the whole frustration of a traditional sale. So you're eating up all of your holding costs while you're waiting for a buyer to make an offer. And then you have property appraisals. This is a concern most agents aren't going to tell you about as well, and most sellers aren't aware of. Your property has to appraise if your buyer is getting a bank loan. If it doesn't appraise, you're going to either have to renegotiate the contract or you're going to have to come to the closing table with the difference. So let's just say you have that $100,000 property, and again, easy math, and the appraiser comes in and says, I'm sorry, it's only valued at $80,000. That's a $20,000 difference. You're going to have to renegotiate that contract because the lender's not going to give a buyer a loan for $100,000 when a property is only worth $80,000. So you either renegotiate or somebody's coming to the table with $20,000. So when it's all said and done, when we talk about cost and time, the bottom line is that a traditional sale is a great option for sellers if they've got at least 15 to 26% of equity and or enough time to come to the closing table in order to pay to get the house sold. That's not including holding costs though. So in the case of a $100,000 house, you're going to need $15,000 to $26,000 in equity in order to sell the property and pay all the costs associated with the sale. But this doesn't include holding costs, which means even if you do have $15,000 to $26,000 in equity, you lost it all in the sale of your home and you still had to come out of your pocket for the holding costs. What's worse is if you do own a $100,000 house and your mortgage is also $100,000. There's a lot of sellers in today's market that have no equity. And if you have no equity, you are going to have to come out of pocket that $15,000 to $26,000 in order to sell your house on the market traditionally, or you're going to overprice it, you're not going to get any traffic, and then that's just a whole new frustrating experience.
So this option might work great for sellers with quite a bit of equity, but it is actually very costly and could be unaffordable for others. In addition, it often takes a long time to get this done.